do have a little sheet with the questions. If you don't have one, we have some extra ones. We can bring them to you. I know they're making some more coffee, so if anybody would like some coffee, there'll be more coming. So with that, everybody knows what the restrooms are, I think. Welcome. So with that, I think I'll turn it over to Karen, and we'll get underway.
Great. Thank you all for coming. As Pete said, my name is Karen Renshaw. I'm going to introduce the candidates to you today, and then we will get started. Please, if they do bring coffee, I'm just going to be sitting here. Feel free to come behind me and take it. It's not a big deal. It's really meant to be very low-key, and I've asked the candidates to please apply what they're saying to specifically to Red Wing and to Goodhue County. I know a lot of what they do in St. Paul, they do have to consider other areas of Minnesota, but really we want to know what they're talking about right now. I did tell them no trash talking. So I will cut them off. So we'll see how that goes. The questions, you have them, they got them. They did not get them until late yesterday afternoon. So I'm sure they're issues that they have thought about for a very, very long time. However, they have had not much notice of what we're going to talk about today. So with that, let me introduce the candidates. We have Matt Schmidt, who is our current incumbent senator, DFL, in the Senate. Mike Goggin is challenger, Republican challenger. For the House of Representatives, we have two new people running this year. We've got Barb, Republican, and Lisa Bailey from the DFL. I did have them pick cards, and they do have an order, so they'll be going in a different order. So we're kind of going to be going off the board. But with that, what I will do is let's just start by letting them talk just for a couple minutes and telling us whatever they want to tell us about themselves, kind of what they're doing. One of the things I did ask them to do on that was to please tell us kind of why they were doing this and three priorities they felt for their campaign and their service in office this year. So, Barb, you drew first.
I was the lucky one.
Go for it.
All right. Well, good morning. Thanks for being here. My name is Barb Haley. I'm running, as she said, for the District 21A for the House seat. I was born and raised in Red Wing. I grew up not too far from here, over by Sunnyside School, caddying for my dad at this golf course. Grew up like most Red Wing kids. I corned a tassel to buy my first bicycle, and I have a lot of great memories. And that's why I moved back here to raise my family. Why I'm running, especially in this election cycle, people say, "What, are you crazy?" There's a line in that movie, Who Bought a Zoo, that says, you know, one moment of just a big dose of courage and your life could change forever. Well, this might be a little bit of that. I do think it takes courage to jump into this race. I'm running because I care about this community. I think that my experience has led me to this point. I've spent a lot of time working in Red Wing on issues that are important to the voters as I've been out talking to people the past 6 months. I hear about healthcare costs. I hear about concern about our education system. I hear about jobs and taxes and government. People want government to work for them. Since I moved back to Red Wing, I've spent time in all those areas, time in healthcare and in education and in workforce. And I bring a business perspective to this race. Most of my career has been as a business person. So as I said, this is my home, and I want to see Red Wing succeed and thrive, and I'll hope to have your vote and represent the district well. Thank you.
I'm Mike Goggin. I also grew up here in Red Wing. I'm the son of Barb and Joe Goggin. Graduated high school here, went to Gustavus, got a business degree. Then went to work for Red Wing Shoe Company for 16 years. In their retail division, they sent me around the country opening stores, training managers, setting up their computer systems, doing industrial sales. But in 2001, I decided I didn't see much I had for job growth because nobody retires from the shoe company. And they had a lot of young people in management there, so I said they need to change careers. So in 2001, I went back to school at the University of Colorado at Denver and got an electrical engineering degree, which also brought me back to Red Wing, which I jokingly told my wife, hey, if I can't get a job in Denver, maybe I can get one at the new plant outside of Red Wing. 12 years later, here we are. It's been great. My wife Pam, we've been married for almost 26 years. It'll be 26 years next month. We have 2 sons, David and Dylan. I just moved David into his first apartment out in Lakewood, Colorado. He's pursuing his doctorate in chemical engineering at Colorado School of Mines. Dylan, he works here at the golf course right now, but he is pursuing his junior hockey career right now. So he'll be starting hockey here in a couple of weeks down in lacrosse. But why I got involved is Mom and Dad always said if you see something you don't like or it's not working, don't sit on the sidelines and complain. Get involved. So when I moved back to Red Wing, my sons, I signed them up for the soccer club. Right away they said, hey, we need help. We can't seem to get this club running and going. So I jumped in, I took over as president, did that for 5 years. Within those 5 years, I maintained, my board and I maintained the registration costs. We increased them a total of $10 over 5 years. We maintained 180 to 200 kids and their families in the program, and they had a really good time doing it. They met a lot of friends. But why I'm getting involved is we saw a $2 billion tax increase in 2013. Along with that, they had the service-to-service business tax and a warehouse tax, which killed the Red Wing Shoe Warehouse. Those 2 taxes finally did get repealed, but we lost good jobs. We lost good job growth here in the Red Wing area. We saw a lot of businesses move warehouse operations out of state, and the business climate here in this state is dismal. It is not the best because we not only charge a business tax, but we also charge a property tax on top of that to the businesses. That goes to the general fund, so that's like monopoly money to the state government. And we have to get that under control and get our businesses competitive again, because we do put our businesses at a disadvantage. I'm out talking to people in the district, I'm out talking to businesses, I've talked to a number of small businesses. Okay, thank you. I can keep going.
She told us she'd get strict if
Yep.
I will. Lisa?
Okay, thank you. My name is Lisa Bailey, and I'm running for the Minnesota House of Representatives as well. I'm an attorney, I'm a former criminal prosecutor, and now own my own small business here in Red Wing. I've been almost 7 years, and that's given me a very interesting perspective. It's a very small business, I have 1 employee, but certainly see a whole new side of things doing that. I've been on the city council here for 8 years, and after about 7.5 years, I thought maybe it's time to take a break and just take a rest. And I was telling my family this, and my daughter said, similar to what you said, like, you know, Mom, you're always telling us if you see something wrong, you can't just sit around and complain, and you can't sit on the couch and do nothing about it. If you have the ability and the means and the skills to get involved, then you have to do that. You are obligated to do that. And I said, you know what, you're right. I got to take my own advice because I do have all those things. And so also took a deep breath, just like Barb said. I didn't grow up here in Red Wing, but my husband's extended family is from here, and when we were looking to decide where we wanted to raise our kids, we looked at Red Wing and decided this was just the ideal place, and we've been very, very happy here. Like I said, after 8 years on the city council, I've learned firsthand the effect of state government decisions on local municipalities and what happens at the local level. I've seen in really in concrete ways what happens when funds are cut, or funds are changed, or funding formulas are suddenly changed, or mandates are suddenly imposed with no funding that goes along with them. And this local governments are told, you just need to make do. And I think that unique perspective and an ability, that will give me an ability to go up and really advocate on behalf of this community and say, wait a minute, you need to look at what the impact of these decisions are at the state level. We were able to get through the economic downturn in 2009, but not everyone weathered it well. We have small businesses that are still hurting. We have cities that are still unable to repair their roads and bridges. We have people who are paying soaring healthcare costs. And these are problems I think we can address, particularly if we can go at it from an economic development perspective and really do things like provide, for our small businesses, provide business training and job retention services, small business loans, working on these healthcare costs. This is something I hear about the doors every single day. It's the one thing that affects everyone. I know we're going to talk more about that. We also need to provide skilled workers for our employers, and how do we do that? We've got to invest in our public schools. We've got to do it at an early age, consistently, and just so that the schools can plan and budget.
And as I said, and finally, we've got roads and bridges. And this is something that if we're going to get our goods to market and our workers to their workplace, we've got to repair our roads and bridges in a planned, budgeted way so that we can do it at the lowest possible cost, but the best possible quality. So I look forward to having some meaningful discussions about this and ask for your consideration in November.
All right, well thanks. First of all, Karen and Pete, thanks for organizing a great event this morning. And I noticed that we started at 8 o'clock sharp, so congratulations. That doesn't happen, certainly not in legislative time, so that's an accomplishment in itself. I guess I just want to say, background, son of Paul and Ray Lynch-Schmidt, retired football coach and teacher. My dad's here in the audience, and thank you for joining us today, Dad. I was a 1998 graduate of Redmond High School, spent 1 year at Central High School, and then went to the new, now not so new high school. And really, when I left for college and grad school, I missed this part of the state. I love the bluffs, I love the people, this is where I call home. And so I'm so thrilled to be able to come back and eventually serve in this area in the state Senate. The reason I ran for Senate in 2012, pretty simple. In the course of 5 years, Minnesota had 2 state government shutdowns. Serious impasses over budget, where Democrats and Republicans in St. Paul could not agree. They didn't just go past the constitutionally assigned adjournment date, they shut the government down. And that's unacceptable in Minnesota. We have a tradition of folks working together in a pragmatic fashion to do what's right for Minnesota. In 5 years, 2 state government shutdowns. We also had seen the legislatures borrow money from our schools, over $1 billion shifted away from our schools. And so the schools were financing their payroll over the summer to make this a difference. And also, I think we had seen an era where we were not making long-term decisions and investments in the state, the sorts of things that make a state good and competitive. And that short-term budgeting wasn't working for Minnesota. Not only 2 state government shutdowns, but a string of budget deficits year in and year out. So I threw my hat in the ring, 30,000 doors later, 50,000 miles on my car later, the Jeep is still running, believe it or not. We've been able to make a change and deliver on all of those promises, balancing our budget for the first time in over a decade. Being able to pay back that school funding shift and investing another $1 billion into education on top of that. And no more state government shutdowns or budget showdowns. The last 4 years have been relatively smooth, folks. And what we've seen, economic growth year in and year out. We've come out of this recession in Minnesota pretty darn well. And for a stretch here, Minnesota has been leading the country in economic growth. Unemployment is well below pre-recession levels. And things are working pretty darn well. But the point that I like to make is that not all parts of the state are seeing that economic growth and prosperity equally. And we've got to continue to focus efforts in parts of greater Minnesota that still haven't emerged from that recession. And that's why I've been proud of our work in St. Paul, balancing the budget, investing in education. Moving forward, infrastructure is going to continue to be a focus. We've done a lot with extending broadband access in hard-to-serve areas, roads and bridges, sewer and water. Those sorts of things are going to continue to be a priority for us. Honest budgeting moving forward, we've got to continue our string of honest budgeting. And then also making sure that we're doing everything that we possibly can to address a rapidly growing problem with healthcare costs. And that's a problem throughout Minnesota, that's a particular problem in southeastern part of the state. And so those would be my 3 priorities: continue our honest budgeting, our strong fiscal practices, also investing in what's made Minnesota great, human capital, education, and infrastructure, and also getting a handle on healthcare costs. I think 2017 is going to be a big year for state-level healthcare reform, and I look forward to working on those issues. And I should just mention, just last week, Minnesota had its credit rating restored to AAA status, first time since 2011, folks. And so that puts Minnesota in a really good position to invest in infrastructure, whether it's roads and bridges or sewer and water. So looking forward to continuing that work in St. Paul.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, now we will start with the first question. This is, as you probably know, an issue that is near and dear to Pete Sorensen's heart. He's been working tirelessly for years on trying to figure out what to do with rising health care costs in this community. So the first question, regarding healthcare costs, what do you see as the problem in this region, and what are your ideas for a solution? We do only have 2 minutes per person, so Barb, sorry.
Are you rotating?
Oh, okay.
That's what I told them.
And I was going to come back, I was, but there were 4 questions.
I want to
Okay,
be
good.
fair, absolutely.
No, that's okay, no, that's what I said.
Okay. We have a disadvantage here in this area that we basically have what would be the first sign of single-payer health care, seeing as how everything we have is Mayo Clinic, which puts us at a disadvantage because we carry all the costs that Mayo Clinic has in all of their research and development, which gets put into the formula for the MNsure and the Affordable Care Act provisions that are required by law now. And we need to have, at the state level, we need to figure out a better way of redistricting how the various parts of the state are divvied up as far as who has what in what area as far as the competition is concerned between multiple hospitals and clinics. And we're at a disadvantage with that because we only basically have one, which is Mayo. And so that's what we need to work on is the redistricting of how the healthcare costs are determined through MNsure. Ultimately, though, what would need to be done is some work at the U.S. Capitol in order to rein in Obamacare and the Affordable Care Act because it's gotten out of control. We're at $400 million right now in just costs alone in MNsure, and that's money that we could have already put towards helping the disadvantaged citizens of the state of Minnesota. And quite honestly, it puts a huge disadvantage on our businesses as well. I talked to a number of businesses, and in October, that's going to make the final decision for them if they stay open. And we can't have that happen. We need our small businesses, and it's got to change.
Steph?
Well, this is the #1 issue I'm talking about the doors. I mean, it affects everybody across all political spectrums. But it's a variety of reasons for it, and I think we need to take a subtle approach to it. I mean, we can't just use a hammer to bang this problem down. One of the big issues is that in our district, our health insurance costs, we have a much higher differential in our district. I think it's called Area 1. Right where we are, as opposed to down in the Rochester area or even up in the Minneapolis area, we, in our little slice of land, pay a lot more in health insurance monthly premium costs than they do in these other districts. I've had people in Cannon Falls point across a highway and say, my neighbor pays $450 less a month than I do because I'm in the area, I think it's Area 1 that we're in. This is a complex problem. I think we can, you know, as a state legislature, there are some things we can do to try to even out those costs so that our particular area is not affected so badly because of our proximity to Mayo and to the Twin Cities health insurance markets. And so that's something I would look forward to really wanting to work on. It's going to be a difficult push, but we've got to do it as a community. We've got to all band together. I know Pete's been working on this issue. But I'm also hearing about the high cost of prescription drugs, and I think there are things we can do about that, you know, using the state's market power, whether it's through transparency on costs of prescription drugs, whether it's educating our medical providers of alternatives that they can use to name brand drugs or various things. But I think there are things we can do about getting the prescription drug costs down, which will then affect all other costs. MNsure, of course, needs to be fixed, and it's something that just the rollout didn't go well, as you all know. There's still a lot of work, but my understanding is that affects 5% of Minnesotans. That's something that needs to be addressed, and those costs will affect other costs. But that, to me, is not the #1 issue that's out there. It gets a lot of the play in the media, but that's not the #1 issue. I see it more as a health insurance.
All right, thanks for the question here, and I'll tell you, I think, again, I'll repeat, I think this is going to be the biggest issue for the 2017 legislature. I think we've seen the Affordable Care Act be implemented, and as we say in economics, we've seen some kind of market equalization here and equilibrium reached, so we kind of know the impacts at the state and federal level, and now the challenge is for us at the state level to determine what we can do to best work under the Affordable Care Act and to drive for choice, for options, for affordability in healthcare. And so there's some good news. We have, because of the Affordable Care Act, and I'm no spokesperson for it, I think it's an imperfect bill, but we have the lowest uninsured rates in Minnesota history. We also have a situation where health insurance companies can no longer discriminate based upon a person's prior medical history, so pre-existing conditions. And also young adults who are entering the workforce but may not have full benefits are able to benefit from their parents' benefits up until the age 26. Those are all good things. But nonetheless, I think the ACA fell flat on cost containment and making healthcare truly affordable. And so that challenge is left to the states right now, unless we expect Washington to fix anything soon, and I really don't. And so in Minnesota, what we've done is we had a bipartisan healthcare task force that met last year, came up with a number of bipartisan recommendations, and we're poised to implement some of those and try to turn those recommendations into action. And so that's one solid piece of news. A second thing is we've held 2 summits in the last 9 months or so here, Cannon Falls and Redwood, bringing together local residents and stakeholders, talking about this issue. In Minnesota, we not only have a problem with healthcare costs around the state, but in southeastern Minnesota, we do have some very unique challenges. Now you look at the Affordable Care Act, it mandated that there be 9 geographic rating areas around the state, 1 for every metropolitan statistical area plus 1. In Minnesota, we have 8 MSAs plus 1, that's 9. So you draw the lines, you end up with, you know, a geographic rating area in southeastern Minnesota that is expensive. And so I carried a bill this year that would make Minnesota the first state in the country to seek a federal waiver to throw those lines out and have maybe one geographic rating area for the state or something less than 9. Because it puts this part of the state at an economic disadvantage. And so that's something that we've been working on directly. Also, let's continue it.
You can come back.
Sure. Ask me a question when we get to it.
I can't talk fast. I'll try not to repeat what's already been said, you know, about the issue of healthcare costs. But when you have, you know, a family that's paying, you know, $800, $1,200, $1,500 a month for healthcare with a $6,000 deductible, it's unsustainable. Minnesota had one of the best healthcare systems in the country before Obamacare. We had one of the lowest rates of uninsured. It was between 4% and 6% at the time. We had a lot of different programs to cover the uninsured, to cover, you know, pre-existing conditions. We had a phenomenal system here. We're very, if you've traveled at all around the U.S., you know that the quality of our care as well is unsurpassed. Obamacare has changed all that. And there aren't a lot of options within the Obamacare legislation for local or state control and flexibility, frankly. So that's the #1 issue. There's a lot of things that have to be changed at the federal level. And I think that's important for people to understand that we can't go to Washington and change Obamacare. So that's something that has to happen first. During the past, 3 to 5 years of Obamacare, we've seen rate increases, 30, 40, 50%. The new rates will come out September 1st for the individual and small business market. You could see 60 to 80% rate increases. That's unsustainable. So we have to address this for our businesses and for our families. One of the other things that you need to be aware of is that the insurance providers themselves are pulling out of the market. Blue Cross pulled out, lost millions of dollars, and there's other insurers that have had the same thing happen. So what's going to happen when there aren't providers to cover individuals in small group? We'll have to see how that plays out this year, but it's a very significant concern that needs to be on our radar. The other thing to remember, I guess, is, as Lisa said, pharmaceutical prescription costs are high. I agree with her comment on transparency measures so that consumers would know where to purchase their prescription drugs. But we also need to recognize that we are getting older as a nation and we are getting sicker. And that's mainly due to 3 chronic conditions: obesity, heart disease, and diabetes. Really?
All right, now the good news is they each get another chance to add to it. They get rebuttal time, but only a couple sentences, okay? All right, Mike, want to add anything?
Well, I agree with what Barb was saying as far as, the last 3 points you made about obesity and diabetes and that. We have to get this under control, and it's not a simple solution, as Lisa said. But it does take courage to do that and to step up and say, I'm taking a position on this. And we do have to follow through on our actions. We just can't sit and have summits and committees and conversations all the time. We finally have to do something that's going to be action to resolve the problem. Where I work at, we do root cause evaluations all the time. That's what we need to do on this, is a root cause. Find out what the true problems are, and then move forward with good, smart actions to resolve those problems and issues.
Yes, because I think the other issue, Barb just mentioned it about transparency, and really when we look at what can the state do, what can government actually do in this area, one of the issues I think billing transparency, that we can, there are measures we can take to require providers to actually disclose what their billing is going to be to either provide estimates or to provide some advanced knowledge of what your costs are going to be before you go in for most procedures, and to prohibit surprise billing, so that there isn't sort of out-of-network sudden costs that are applied to your bill for out-of-network costs that you didn't agree to after the fact, and then you suddenly get it and it's too late, now you're required to do that. So any kind of transparency measures, I think those are important, and they're the things that the state can do.
And I'll be as succinct as possible here. You know, I think you look at the challenges in healthcare. It's broader than just southeastern Minnesota. It's broader than just Minnesota. We've got some challenges with healthcare drivers, aging population, very expensive treatment, also the cost of prescription drugs. A lot of those challenges are at the federal level, but nonetheless, the state has to do everything it possibly can to help folks with options and afford their premiums and their deductibles on a month-to-month basis. The sorts of things I'm trying to promote, try to even out the cost differentials between different areas of the state, that premium cost differential we talked about. Also, having more options for folks. We saw Blue Cross Blue Shield exit the individual small group market. That's a real challenge for that 5% of Minnesotans that need access to options. And so we're looking at Minnesota Care. It's a program that was put in place in the early 90s with Governor Arne Carlson. It's been very successful. It gives me hope that Minnesota can provide solutions in the state. Maybe expanding eligibility for hardworking families that are falling through the cracks that just don't have options. It's not unheard of to see people pay $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 a year before getting any benefit from their health insurance. So we've got to have those sorts of options on the table. And what sorts of measures are we able to drive it to address the underlying problem in healthcare? And those are the cost drivers. And the last thing I would just say is, you know, the worst thing that we can do as a legislature is swing back and forth with policy recommendations that aren't fully thought through, that are knee-jerk reactions. And that's why 2017, truly, folks, is going to be the first year that this legislature in Minnesota can have a thoughtful conversation about state-level healthcare reform. So we're right on pace with where we should be. We've got great bipartisan recommendations. We've had conversations around the state, and now it's time to do everything that we possibly can to make healthcare reform work at the state level. And so I'm all ears for any ideas that are out there, otherwise I've got many of my own. So thank you.
Yeah, I would like to talk about MNsure because I do think that is within our control. And the system isn't working. And it's sort of, if you're investing in a stock and you're not making money, you change your investment strategy. We need to have the courage to call out that MNsure is very, very broken. And I would not be in favor of putting more money into it. I met with the folks at the county that work in Health and Human Services. I've also met with people at the state that worked on the MNsure program. What used to take 5 to 15 minutes to enroll somebody in the public assistance programs now takes 3 days. The workaround, the actual piece of paper that tells them the workaround to the MNsure system is 14 pages long. The top 8 counties in the state have hired more than 200 plus FTEs just to work, to handle the enrollment process, to handle the paperwork, and to work with the broken computer enrollment system. None of you, if you're running a business, would continue that type of operation. So we need to have the courage to call it out and fix it, and that's one thing that is within our control at the state level.
Okey doke. Question number 2.
Hey, Karen, can I just say one thing?
Sure.
Thanks, guys, for addressing it. We'll probably be getting back to healthcare questions, but for those of you that can hang out for a little while, we're going to talk about transparency. A little bit more about how tools and how we can achieve that. So hopefully you all can hang out for a little while after. Thanks.
All right. Question number 2. This made it into the State of the City address yesterday from Mayor Bender. Should the state get involved in helping with the severe lack of rental housing we are currently experiencing in this out-of-state community? If yes, how? If no, please explain what you say. Lisa, you're on.
Well, yes. The answer is yes. This is one of the areas I've been working very hard on for the last 5 years, I believe, both as a city council member and as a liaison to the Housing Redevelopment Authority. 2014 housing needs, I believe it's called, housing needs, a comprehensive housing needs analysis study by our HRA found a huge pent-up demand for affordable, nice rental housing in this community that far exceeds the supply. I mean, this is a critical issue, and as employers, I'm sure you hear about this all the time. So there are things that the city has been doing to try to address this. One of them is through the HRA, we've created an affordable, affordable housing trust fund, which is funded with seed money from HRA levy funds. And the idea is that it's just been funded now over the summer, and so nothing has happened yet. But the idea is to be able to provide grants and incentives and tax credits to developers to provide affordable housing. And by that I mean workforce housing. I'm not talking about subsidized housing, but quality workforce housing so that families can come into the area. They don't necessarily have to buy a house right away. They can come in and know that they can rent, and they can do it in a quality way that's close to their employer. So we're just getting started with that, but it's getting statewide recognition across the country. Actually, I'm not really sure why, because to me this seems like a no-brainer. You know, if as a city, you need to actually step up and say, we're going to give you some tools, and we're going to give you some incentives to do this. But the city itself has also been involved in this issue, and I have as well. And we were working with the Greater Minnesota Partnership and the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities to work on providing tax credits and incentives for developers through the state. And I testified about this as a city council member in 2015. I think it might have been with Matt, I don't remember, to work on this issue, and we came very close to getting it passed. I'm hopeful that that's something that will happen in the next couple of years here, but it's something that's it's getting recognition across the state that this is not a problem that's unique to Red Wing or to this area.
Great. Really important question here, and it's not just one of those throwaway lines that you say, yeah, this is important too. In our February state budget and economic forecast, the state economist a pretty optimistic view of Minnesota's budget and economic future. But there were a couple of warning signs out there. One was we don't know what's happening with China. We're going to have some slow growth. How about the national economy? Some questions there. And with Minnesota, questions about a labor shortage. How are you possibly going to attract new people to a community if you don't have the housing for them? And I've heard this time and time and time again, up and down the river corridor in particular, but throughout southeastern Minnesota. And this is a real challenge. And so the question is, what can the state do to solve the problem? And I think that there's some great local solutions that are out there. I know Randall Emmerlin and HRA have talked about a workforce housing trust fund. And I think any sort of partnership that we're able to do with the state, helping to make good ideas at the local level a reality. And I look back to my work with broadband, actually, and extending high-speed internet access around the state. We have a lot of great providers and cooperatives doing really good work in Minnesota. There are about 20% of the state lacking access to high-speed broadband. We created a matching grant program that allowed local solutions, mostly private sector-based solutions, to rise up and stretch out that return on investment to make a number of investments and projects more profitable, more realistic, more doable for the private sector. And so if we were to apply that sort of approach for affordable housing, for workforce housing, I think that you can see a lot of good ideas that have been discussed at the local and regional level that just lack funding or financing. Give them an opportunity to move forward. And so I think that partnership between the state as being more of a financial partner and local stakeholders in moving forward with affordable and workforce housing is absolutely imperative to our economic competitiveness moving forward. And that's no more true than in Red Wing or up and down the river corridor. And so it's something that, you can talk about it, but at a certain point you've got to put some resources behind it. And that's why a lot of us are really serious about a robust, responsible bonding rate when interest rates are low and need is incredibly great for infrastructure around the state. Investing in the future. Like any small business, when times are good, you've got a profit, you can invest in future economic growth and profitability. And that's something that we'd like to do with affordable and workforce housing.
Thank you. I'd like to mention something that hasn't been talked about yet with this issue. I meet with a lot of folks all over the district, and this week I was talking to an individual down in Wamashaw. He owns a small family construction business. He was telling me about building a first home for his daughter and his son-in-law. And a starter home, said, pretty basic home. He was a woodworker, so he had a little bit of fancy woodworking kitchen, but a basic home. Cost $300,000. And when I asked him, that's a lot of money. Starter home, $300,000. Especially when your dad's even building it. I'm sure she got a deal. We have so many regulations, and our tax structure is so out of whack. 24% of the cost of new construction are in costs to meet those regulations. So in a $300,000 home, that's about $84,000 just to meet the regulations. The state of Minnesota has over 40 different housing regulations. So how do we expect small, contractors or builders to meet those? And that would apply to a rental market as well as a, housing market. That's something that is within our control of the state government, to look at our overextended regulations that are impacting homeless greatly, and those costs are passed on to consumers. So I wanted to mention that. Also wanted to mention what I hear when I talk to property owners in Red Wing. I've been told there's 81 lots alone across from the clinic that are fully ready, sewer, water, electrical. Okay, why aren't people building there? Why aren't they investing in Red Wing? We hear sometimes that it's hard to invest in Red Wing. It's hard to start a business. And that's not a personal issue with the city, but I think it's a process and a procedure. And again, government is too complex. If we don't have a reputation of being easy to do business with, we are not going to attract investors. And that's something that I think the city needs to address.
Well, Barb stole on my thunder. But I agree with what she said. I mean, we do have way too much regulation on our businesses, and we need reform in that area. The other thing we need to do is the cities need to take a look at what they have for their regulations and processes and procedures, and how can they get more efficient on that. I have a gentleman that I talked to that thought he'd get into the rental business here in Red Wing. And he rented, so he had a house and decided to rent it out. Well, come to find out, when his renter didn't pay all of the city services, guess who got stuck with the bill? The owner of the home. And so he right there just said, I'm not even going to try to do business in Red Wing again. He says, I'm done trying to even get into the rental property business. Because he saw that need for affordable housing in the area. And so when you have issues like that come up, you put the property owners at a significant disadvantage in order to be able to make the property affordable and yet keep the costs in place. And when you have that overregulation and putting it on the owner's back that the tenant didn't pay their city utilities, well, who's going to want to go into business and do that? I mean, I wouldn't do it. And so the city of Red Wing really needs to look at what their policies and regulations are here in the city. The other thing is, going back years ago when the city of Red Wing spent a ton of money from the coalition of cities for the housing inspections. I mean, we still don't have that completely resolved, and that's been, what, 15 years or better? And so we've spent a considerable amount of money in this town trying to force property owners to do things that are just not feasible. So why would you even get into business here in Red Wing in the rental property business?
I'll follow up just briefly on the rental housing issue, very complex as well. The city was large part the rental housing litigation that has, as you mentioned, has dragged on for quite a long time, but was largely paid for through our insurance. So that was, excuse me, the city did have to pay for some of it, but much of it was paid for through our insurance. But just so you know about that. The result of that litigation, though, has been that we have we're able to have a rental housing code and inspection procedures that protect people's rights, that protect the constitutional rights of landlords, private property owners, and so that ultimately has been a much better thing. And the vast majority of rental housing owners are consenting and have no problem and actually invite the inspection so that you have safe, quality housing for renters. So that has been a good thing. Those 81 lots across from the clinic, multiple times the city council has approved development projects or tax credits or what have you, I think 3 different times for 3 different developers, and it's fallen through. And why is it? Not on the city level, because the developers aren't able to make a cash flow, and they just can't ultimately make it happen. And I agree with Barb and Mike that there are regulations at the state and federal level, just we have to get a handle on this, because if we're going to invite people, if we're going to seriously address this problem, we've got to make it simple, or at least easier, for private developers to get in the game and actually make these happen. Last thing is our housing stock in this city is, we have a lot of really good quality but aging housing stock. We have people who are elderly people who are living 1 or 2 people in a very large house because they can't find quality senior housing that they can afford. What I'd like to see is let's develop more quality senior housing on one level that's smaller, get a lot of these seniors who'd like to move, get them into that housing, then be able to redevelop those larger homes that are perfect for families, and we can invite more families and young people into our community.
You know, I would just add that, I agree with much of what was said, and I think that we all are sensitive to the role regulation plays in development. And I would just say it's easy to just throw out a blanket statement and say regulation is too burdensome. I think we all agree with that, right? But when you dive down and you try to identify specific regulations that should be thrown out or reversed or modified, it's a little bit more difficult. And so I'm all ears if there are regulations that are burdensome that we can change, but we also have to be realistic with the notion that a lot of these regulations are put in place for consumer protection, for health, for meeting safety codes, and there is an appropriate balance between regulation and consumer protection, and also allowing the private sector to maximize investments. And so I think we're trying to find that sweet spot, and I'm not saying we're there, but it's so helpful when we have a conversation about the regulatory burden to drive down deeper and talk about, well, what does that mean? What exactly could we change? And I'm all ears and certainly open-minded to that sort of approach. But in my conversations, I hear a lot of feedback about return on investment, about the lack of private investment capital, about the need for partnerships that are holding up a lot of investments around the state and infrastructure and these sorts of projects. And so that's something that we know that we can do, especially when times are relatively good in Minnesota. Make those investments for the long haul. But that conversation about finding that right balance of regulation, that's always with us. We always want to try to hone in on that sweet spot, and that's something I take very seriously.
I would just quickly point out, again, for when developers come in and say they can't make the project go, one of the other issues there is our property taxes. The state of Minnesota, again, has over 40 property tax classifications. We're the second highest in the country in our property tax level, and that's a component in why a developer, again, would not want to take on a project. You don't want to be in the top 10 in taxes in Minnesota. It's in every single category.
I agree with the taxes on that as well. That was going to be my comment was we have, in this area, in May, I don't know how everybody else's tax statement came through, but mine went up 22.6% just on my house. So imagine what that would do to rental properties in this area. We have a significant property tax issue here that we need to get that under control. Goodhue County went through, and I don't recall the exact number, but they were around a 4% property tax increase for this next year. And then where does that other 18% come from? How does the city of Redmond come up with that number? So when we talk about rental income or rental housing, we got to look at what it's going to take with that regulation and the taxes that the owners of those properties have to include in the cost of the rental of the property.
We only have 20 minutes, I forget, we're talking to politicians. So what we're going to do is, we're just going to go with question number 3, but I'm going to give them a little bit, that is really complicated. I put business and education in the same question, and that really is not fair. So we're going to give them a little bit more time to speak and a little bit more time to rebuttal, and then if any of you would like to answer any of the light rail or the questions, we'll have a half-an-hour session for question and answer. You can address it then. So I believe, yes, Matt, you're up.
Yeah, I'll start, my response to this question kind of more broadly. Prior to running for the legislature, I did a lot with my consulting practice, and one of my projects was to meet with CEOs of every major Minnesota corporation. So about 20 conversations I had with CEOs of Minnesota's Fortune 500 and largest employers. And we had a conversation about, what contributed to Minnesota's economic competitiveness, what were the things that really made Minnesota work, and what were the shortfalls, or the things that we could spend some more time on fixing. And there were themes that developed from these conversations, really impressive insight from a lot of these individuals. And what they would say is this, Minnesota may be a hard state to attract talent to because of a cold climate, and kind of known as maybe being up there far north. But once people come here, they fall in love with Minnesota. And that's certainly true for folks who grew up here. They may leave, but more often than not, they come back because they miss the high quality of life here. And so probably our biggest economic competitive feature in Minnesota is our quality of life. The fact that this is a great place to raise a family. Minnesota was recently recognized as the #1 state in the country to raise a family. It's a great place to live. We have a tradition of investing in things that really matter. Education and human capital. Our education system isn't perfect. We certainly have room for growth. But when you compare it to the rest of the country, we're pretty darn good. And these are competitive advantages. And the natural amenities, the investments in parks and recreation, the whole ball of wax is really a good backdrop for doing business in Minnesota. I should hearken to say that I think CNBC had Minnesota ranked the #1 state for business because of that high quality of life, our work ethic, our education system. And so those are all competitive strengths of Minnesota. My point would be is we can't rest on our laurels. Those aren't givens. They don't just happen. Our education system, for instance, is the result of a legacy of investing in education. And so making sure that the state is doing everything it can to invest in our competitive strengths, infrastructure, human capital, and also, I think, positioning our communities to be able to invest. And that's why I think it's so important for us at the state level to do what we can to provide property tax relief and direct aid for our local governments, whether it's local government aid or county program aid, also direct funding for our schools. Because if they don't get that partnership from the state and the appropriate level of funding, they have to get that property tax button time and time again. And we saw that in the first decade of this century. Minnesota, in my mind, took its eye off the ball. And we pushed a lot of our problems directly into our schools and to our cities. And what happened is we had a period of budget deficits, one after the next, and uncertainty at the state level, and a lot of cuts and property tax increases, and uncertainty at the local level. And so I think probably the biggest thing that we can do is have a steady hand with state budgeting. For any business, you want to be able to plan. You don't want to be undulating back and forth from one extreme to the next. You want to have some level of certainty, be able to plan out 3 to 5 years. So that's why it's so important for us to have a steady approach to budgeting at the state level, to be investing in our schools and our local communities and our governments so that we're able to not have to rely upon that property tax button too much. And where possible, target relief where we can. This last year we had cut in the unemployment insurance tax because we were having a surplus. We had room to cut the unemployment insurance tax. We also, in our tax bill, have direct property tax relief for small businesses around Minnesota. Those are direct benefits for business. Indirect benefits are funding our schools, funding our local government, taking the pressure off of local property taxpayers. And so you look at what's that sweet spot, that balance that you want to strike. I think it's the state investing in the things that make Minnesota competitive. I'll say it again, human capital and infrastructure. Leveling out the playing field where we see pockets of struggle, workforce housing and job training, broadband access, those are all important things. Healthcare affordability is the next big thing that we're going to be talking a lot about. We have already today. We're going to be doing a lot more at the legislative level with regards to state level healthcare reform. And so it's trying to create that environment for businesses to prosper. And I have to tell you, things are not perfect, but I think we have come so far in Minnesota in the last 5 years in balancing our budget, investing in education, providing direct and indirect property tax relief. Those are all parts of the mix that I think have made Minnesota stronger today than we were just 4 years ago before the Senate took office. And so there's so much more that can be said, but there's an overview.
First, I want you to know that I've been endorsed by the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce as the candidate that will do the most to promote job growth and help small businesses. So you can check out that endorsement on my website. I'm proud of that endorsement. I spent most of my career, as I said, in business. And when you've been there and you've hired people and fired people and managed a budget and had to respond to a P&L and started up new divisions and closed divisions when they weren't working, I've lived it. And I think that's important when you're deciding who you want to elect. Because these issues are real. It's not just sitting and talking about policy. It's how does it really get implemented. Our tax structure, I'll say it again, is out of whack, and it's killing our small and our large businesses. Particularly the business property taxes. The business property taxes, their market value is about 12.4%, and they pay 32% in property taxes. There was property tax relief in the tax bill that Governor Dayton vetoed. And that property, or that general tax bill, had the most bipartisan support of any tax bill in 30 years, and the governor vetoed it. That included tax relief for small businesses, for farmers, and for individuals. So we need to hopefully have a special session, but if not, we need to bring those same issues back around in 2017. When you talk about the link between businesses and education, I have spent most of my time in Redmond working on those issues. When I see a problem, I get involved, and I dive right in and work towards a solution, whether what that is starting a robotics team so kids get a real-life industry experience, whether that's launching a project called Redmond Works to link our manufacturers and our education system. It's working with the chamber on taking kids out to manufacturers on tours, getting a bus, taking 100 kids down to Southeast Tech and Wellness so they can see what career tech education looks like. I've done all those things. That's important because it's easy to say we support education. Who doesn't support education, right? That's small and apple pie. But who's rolled up their sleeves and done something about it? We can talk more, but you're probably time.
Yeah, I agree with Barb in the fact that our property taxes that we put on our businesses in this state is just, again, going back to what I said earlier, it's putting our businesses at a significant disadvantage. And we need to get that resolved and reformed so that our businesses can be competitive. And we do have so many regulations on our businesses, it's unreal. When I worked for the shoe company, quick story, back in 1988, going back to what people have said about what happens when the decision's made and what's the ramifications of that. I think it was 88, 89, EPA came out with a rule saying you couldn't use certain chemicals. Well, for Redmond Shoe Company, that meant the glue that they were using, they couldn't use that glue anymore because it had those chemicals in it. Well, I was working out in Lakewood, Colorado at the time, and I had a bunch of firefighters, smoke jumpers, that were fighting forest fires. And they were coming in with our boot, model 699, and they were saying, look at these soles, they're just peeling off. I can go down the street and pay less shoes and buy Chinese boots for $50 versus $150 for these. So those things we have to look at. We have to look at what is the ramifications of our decisions that are made at the state level and the federal level that affect our businesses and what really is going to happen to them. So that's what we have to work on there. As far as education, I'm a project manager at the nuclear plant. I've been doing that for over 8 years now. And when I see our workforce out there doing our projects, they're aging workforce. We don't have a lot of young people coming into the trades. I'm a member of the IBEW. I've been a member with them for 12 years. And it's sad to see that we don't have a lot of people going into the trades anymore. I've met with the trade unions, and you look at what they're doing to train people. It's amazing. And we need to work on that. Every Hand Joint here in town is a wonderful organization that helps kids figure out what they want to do in life. And we have to teach the kids, or not teach them, but help them find their way to what makes them happy, what makes them get out of bed every morning to go to work. And with that, I want to see us not only push the 4-year college education like I went through because I can't do the handwork, but we have a lot of people that can do the handwork. And there are very good paying jobs out there, and there are a lot of jobs out there, but we don't have enough trained people out there to do that. And so I want to work on helping the people, help the kids figure out what they want to do, and then work with the trades in order to help build our workforce.
Keeping our local business environment strong is absolutely critical to keeping and retaining families and having our community be growing in the future and allowing, being able to attract those workers and skilled workers. And how are we going to do that? Well, I hear over and over again the difficulties finding skilled workers, the lack of affordable housing, we've talked about, the high property taxes, and then the high cost of health care. I talked to a small business owner yesterday down in Wabasha who said, I desperately want to tear down my building and put up something more efficient, more sustainable. I can't get a reasonable loan. I mean, and that I looked at it like, that's crazy. This guy should be able to get a small business loan. He wants to do it, he's willing to pay for it, and he just wasn't able to get those resources. So what can we do about that? Well, I think we can do a lot more in terms of job training, as Mike has referenced. We can work on the technical skills and technical education, investing in education, and recognizing that this is going to be a long-term investment. In Minnesota, we have that work ethic, and we have that belief in the quality of life, but this has got to be a long-term issue, and I think a lot of employers, including big employers around the state, are recognizing that our education system has got to be something that we address altogether. But we also need to be able to provide those small business loans and credits and the training for their small business owners. In terms of education, I've just referenced all of those things and how those feed into the business climate. But we have terrific business teachers in this community. We have not just in this community, in the whole state, but we have a great set of people. They want to work hard, they want to get things done, but they need the resources, they need the support, they need to support staff and social workers. I think there's been more of a trend towards, there were a lot of cuts made in the last 10 years. There's been more of a trend to replacing some of those, not all of them. I mean, certainly we don't want to go back to maybe the way things were at one point, but when times were much more flush. But we do need to provide the teachers with the skills and with the resources that they need. I've been a member of the Every Hand Joint Partnership. I know Barb, of course, was instrumental in starting that. But that's a terrific example of a public-private partnership where we are able to work on, as a community, work on improving the outcomes for the Red Wing students. And I think that's something we can replicate across the district and hopefully across the state.
Just briefly, Tom, I guess I would like to thank you for recognizing the great work that the tax bill reflects. There's a lot of really good ideas in that bill, and but for a small but significant drafting error, that thing would be law right now. And so I've worked a lot on a number of those provisions. That means a really good bill. 170 legislators out of 201 working for the darn thing, so it's about as bipartisan as you get. And so I'd love to see that become law. Also like to just mention Every Hand joined in what we're seeing in Greater Minnesota with with local education partnerships. And the traditional model has been that schools are in it alone. That's your job to educate the students. But what we're seeing with Every Hand Joint, I think a lot of folks in the room here are familiar with it, is more of a community-based approach to education funding and partnership. And I was proud to lead an effort to get the state involved in being a partner at the table. And Red Wing, Northfield, and St. Cloud are 3 beneficiaries of some state funding to help collect data and to do more with that effort with Every Hand Joint. And I'm hopeful that we're going to have a strong state partner in helping these sorts of local education partnerships move forward and expand and be even more effective than they have been. Every account I've heard is that the program is doing exceedingly well. They've had an incredible summer. And I think we want to see this sort of model grow where there's interest and expand where other communities would like to see it replicated close to home. And it's just another point I should make is, in the last 4 years, not only did we pay back that $1 billion school funding shift, essentially that loan from our schools, but we were also able to invest another $1 billion into education on top of that. $600 million went straight to the education funding formula, but the other $400 million was targeted in new ways to help rural districts, in many cases, succeed and address very unique challenges. One thing that we emphasized was facility maintenance and funding for our rural districts the last few years. A lot of districts need boilers or roofs or other infrastructure. Helping those schools pay for that continued maintenance is so important. And so last thing I just mentioned is, in egg country, you've seen a lot of landowners, egg owners, pay a little bit more for capital levies than they would for operating levies. And so another provision in our tax bill actually provides some state relief for egg owners. It looks like the yield's going to be great this year, but the prices are down. And so it'll help foster, I think, a stronger partnership with our residents, our commercial land, and also our egg land in passing worthy and needed school referendum. And so I'll leave it at that, but there's a lot of things that we're making strong progress on. And also the point about college and career readiness. In the first decade of this century, the focus was on college readiness. Every high school student should go to college, four-year college. What we've seen in the last several years is a reorientation towards college and career readiness. An intentional focus on the fact that not all jobs need a four-year degree. Not all high school students want to go get a four-year degree. And so that intentionality of trying to fill the jobs not only of today but tomorrow, and matching programs and job opportunities with students who are interested in them is so vitally important. That's been an intentional change from 10 years ago to today, and we're seeing it play out at the state level. Anyway, thanks for the time, Mary.
Okay, I just have to say that everybody's brought up the initiative Every Hand Joint. Some of you know it and some of you don't, so I'm just going to call it out. I started that with the Jones Family Foundation and did the heavy lifting for 3 years to get that program launched. I'm very proud of that work as well. And that again is indicative of how I work. I get involved, I build a coalition of partners, and get something done. Additionally, with the issue of the trades and getting students interested in the trades and building awareness around manufacturing careers in particular, I started the initiative called Rugged Works. It was a partnership between the local manufacturers, the chamber, the technical college, and the high school in order to work on awareness of manufacturing careers, and we did some really good work, and there's more that will be coming in the future, I hope. But that is imperative for our community when you look at our manufacturing base. Really is the lifeblood of our economy here. And there's a lot of work to be done with students and families to educate them about those careers.
Yeah, I agree with Barb too on that. It's getting the community involved. We can't just sit back and hope somebody else is going to do it for us. We actually, in this community, we do a much better job than most other communities in getting involved and getting folks like Barb involved in starting the Abraham joining the Redwood Work program. Those are huge because kids don't really know what they want to do. But when you look at our high school, for example, we have a wonderful shop program up there. I had kids on my soccer teams that I coached that were in the program with Doug, and just, I mean, Doug just inspired the kids. And I have a nephew that, he's a welder at Newfeld Services, and he just loves it, but that's what he likes to do. He likes to work with his hands. So we need to help the kids find out what their purpose in life is, for lack of a better. And that's getting involved, and we need to not only have funding for it and that, but we need to get people actively involved in it.
Well, this issue about finding skilled workers and meeting those needs has been something that the city has been working on, and we've had a real problem. For example, we just simply can't get Boilermaker operators. We can't get, I mean, we cannot find qualified people. We've had to go, I think at one point, we had to contract with the person who was doing water quality studies, sort of one of the staff people from, I believe it was the city of Zumbrota. And that seems crazy, doesn't it? How can we not find people who are qualified who want to come here? And so what we've done is start to say, okay, in a real intentional way, we can't just sit back and wait for people to apply for these jobs. We've got to work with them. We want to keep Red Wing students, using this as an example, in Red Wing, and how do we develop those skills for them and keep them here? So the city, as an example, is doing more and more of having apprenticeship programs, having things where we're working with Southeast Technical, trying to identify what our needs are, trying to identify who the students are who might be able to sort of funnel up into these programs. And looking at all of the employees, you know, this is something as a council that we're constantly looking at, is we know there's going to be a lot of very qualified, very skilled people retiring in the next 5 to 10 years in the city of Redmond. What are we going to do about that? Because we've got to get, these are skilled workers who need to be able to come here with those skills and qualifications. So we've been able to do that. Southeast Technical is going through a big change right now, and we're really applauding that and doing whatever we can to support that, certainly with Every Hand Join and Red Wing Ignite as well, working on those sort of unusual, imaginative initiatives that are public-private partnerships to bring more quality skilled people here and to provide the training for the students who are already here.
Great. With that, I think we are going to open it up to questions now. Does anyone have any questions yet?
So staying along the theme of business, I think that what you've said is great for businesses, but I haven't heard anything for the employees. And what I mean along those lines is I recently moved here in January from out of state. I took about a 25% pay cut. The cost of living in Minnesota is significant to where I come from. My wife is at about a 70% pay cut from what we were making previously. And again, with the cost of living being what it is, what are we doing to address wages? The living wage in Red Wing for a single person is $14.75 an hour. For one person added to that, so whether it be a single parent plus a child or two, you're getting over $20 an hour. And entry-level positions, even some of our middle management positions, don't even come close to addressing that. So how do you see your role as a leader within this community and state to get business owners to offer that type of wage where we can be competitive and attract people to fill these needs? Because it's not just, it is a wonderful place to live, but if you can't afford it, and if the businesses aren't going to pay it, we're just going to bang our heads against the wall forever.
When I talk to business owners, they want quality employees, and their wage scales are going up because of the supply and demand issue in order to attract the people that they need. Capital Safety is a good example of that. When they did their expansion and were hiring a lot more people, and their wage scale went up. I was down at Hartford Home yesterday in Lake City, and they're doing a significant expansion. They're going like 10% a year. Their wages are also going up. So I think the market will take care of that. There's also a lot of creative things that businesses are doing. They're doing a lot of their own training now, where it used to be you had to come to the job trained. I hear business owners say, I'm hiring for character and intelligence, work ethic, and I'll train on the rest, because they need the workers so desperately. So an employee is getting the benefit of maybe not having to pay for their own training or education. They can get it on the job. I also think employers are being very creative and responsive to the millennial generation. Flexible work time, being able to work in different areas of a company or different areas of a manufacturing line versus staying at one job for 2 years. So I hear a lot of innovation and creativity there. So I think all those things will happen, and it'll happen in the natural marketplace.
All right, sure. You know, there's only so much the state can directly do, and this can be frustrating, because we definitely see income inequality and cost of living and other challenges that are facing individuals and families and small businesses, loom large in day-to-day life. And so, one thing the state did do is we recognize that there are a lot of folks who are having to work as hard as ever, 2, 3 jobs, both parents, trying to make ends meet. And so this legislation, we raised the minimum wage, and we did it incrementally over time. But the hope there is it doesn't just benefit the folks earning the minimum wage, but it puts upward pressure on all wages. And it's something that we're able to do to help hardworking Minnesotans make a living and make a better living. And so that's one thing. That's not going to solve all the problems. I mean, let's be realistic here. I think a lot of what is important has been discussed today. I mean, striking that right balance with regulation and tax code. But it's no lie that Minnesota is a state. Traditionally, we've been a high-tax, high-service state, and it's worked for us. I mean, you look at the history of Minnesota since the Minnesota Miracle, actually. Governor Wendy Anderson, about 40 years ago, ushered in a bipartisan approach to providing property tax relief around the state, equalization for property tax wealthy, property tax poor areas, equitable approach to education funding. And what that has meant for economic competitiveness and quality of life around the state, we cannot overstate the impact. It is so important. And so having the approach that tries to strike that right balance, where we have high-quality schools, we have we strive towards affordable health care, we invest in education, and we have an appropriate safety net for folks who are doing their best to make ends meet, but are still falling through the cracks, trying to help them get back on their feet. And in my mind, that's a big part of that solution. There's no one solution, there's no one easy answer, but having that right mix is really integral to that question. And thank you for asking.
Yeah, we do have a supply and demand issue here in this area. I see it every day at work. We've had the Viking Stadium that was being built. That put a lot of pressure on us at the plant when we were doing our modifications and outages and that. But that did drive up wages. I can tell you that for sure, because I saw it in my budgets and my monthly actuals and the profit and loss statements. And so that's what we need to do, is create a climate here, an economic climate that encourages high wages. And by doing that, we need to reform our taxes, we need to reform our regulations, and we need to invest in education of the people. And as Barb said, I've met with a bunch of companies too that have said the same thing. Go ahead and come on in, but we're looking for the character of the individuals. And when you bring them in, then we train them, because we have companies that are becoming so specific in what they're doing that you can't get that in a normal education classes or colleges or universities or technical college or trade schools. And so doing that's what the companies are doing. They're investing in the people to do that, and then they get them on a path to success that gives them the opportunity, if they push hard for it and work hard for it, they can grow their wages. And so that's what we need to do, is encourage more of that.
Well, I think the market can and will address some of this, and we can see that just like Mike's talking about. But I think in order to, if that is going to happen, in order to then retain those employers in large businesses and keep them from leaving, and we want this to be a competitive state generally, we've got to keep costs low. And we've got to do that by keeping taxes as low as possible and getting those healthcare costs down. And I think that's a huge driver in a lot of these employee costs. And so that's something we, as Matt stated, there are a lot of things that we can directly do as a state, but that's one of them. We've got to work on getting those costs down those per employee costs. And if we do that, then we can hopefully give some relief to the employers who can then provide higher wages. It's not a direct response, but I think it's something that we've got to look in the long term towards how we address this.
All right. Other question?
Yeah. So as a recent veteran, the VA healthcare system is on an island mess. What is your plan? What is the state doing to address this issue for veterans issues in general?
Well, I have a lot of respect for our veterans. I come from a family of military people. My dad, my father, mom, my uncles all served in the military. I have a nephew right now in the Air Force flying C-17s. So our military, we have to take care of it. Fortunately, our VA here in the state of Minnesota, from folks out at the plant that have retired from the military that use the VA up there, they said it's one of the best that they've got to, because a lot of our people move around the country and that. Myself personally, what I think we should do is open up resources for other than just going to VA, that they should be able to use their military benefits in any hospital or clinic in the state of Minnesota. I think that would be a good solution for the military personnel.
Well, first of all, thank you for your service. I can't see you, but okay. We certainly appreciate that. I think if we've seen if nothing else in the last 15, 20 years, over like 15 years, with the increase in service all over the world, we've seen the need for this, and that while we have a large aging population of veterans, we have younger veterans who are coming back with very different needs and wants. And we need to respect that, and we need to follow through on our promises to you. You gave a great sacrifice, your family did, and we need to follow up with that in whatever way we can as a state. I think I've also heard, actually, Mike, that our local VA hospital is quite good. It's not perfect, but I've heard certain good things about that. I work with veterans in my work in Dakota County with doing guardianships and conservatorships, and that's something I hear quite a bit about. It's a very complicated system. But whatever we can do as a state, we should certainly do to simplify that. I think some of the things that we can do to returning family members is some of those hiring preferences, some of the, whether there's some kind of financial incentives we can give to employers, to hiring veterans, or to training and training opportunities. All of those things are things we should be looking at consistently, and this is a huge pool of people, of citizens who've given to the state and given to the country, and we've got to follow through on the promises to them.
All right, well, thanks for the question. Again, thank you for your service, and it's a really important question. I'm glad you asked it. And I'm going to agree with much of what Lisa had to say here, and I guess first and foremost, it's just so easy for politicians to just extend the platitudes and say things that sound great for our vets, and in many cases send them out to war and not follow through on the committed resources that are needed when they come back home. And that's something that we've really got to be serious about, and making sure that we honor those commitments. And that means investing in our VA and investing in resources that help veterans get back into civilian life. And so at the state level, this is something that we've been very deliberate about. We actually extended tax benefits for veterans' retirement pay. We want to make Minnesota a place where veterans want to retire. And so that was included in our budget bill that this year actually became law. And so we're going to be no longer an outlier in this particular tax provision. We're going to be like many other states in extending benefits to veterans. We want you to be here. We want you to stay here. We want you to invest and grow your businesses and your family here. Moving beyond that, I think it's important for us to continue to invest in the VA and make sure our Veterans Administration has the resources they need. A lot of these issues are federal in nature, but it takes strong state partnerships and following through on promises that are made. You also look into preferential hiring practices and certain incentives and credits to help vets find employment when you come back home or you're in a military career. And I think beyond that, you look at the need for making it easier for veterans, and frankly, all young adults or those who want to improve their lives or take their careers in different directions, of getting an education. And you look at how difficult it is in the year 2016 for young adults or for veterans or anybody who's mid-career to go back and seek a 2- or 4-year degree or training. Very expensive. It disrupts your life. And everything that we can possibly do to make that a more seamless transition, to offer incentives, and generally to make higher education more affordable. I think it's inexcusable for folks to be leaving college and university with a mortgage and not the house. I mean, that level is incredible. And so we need to do more for targeting resources accordingly.
I know you're trying to wrap it up. Eric, thanks for your question and your service. It's been said that the Minnesota VA is one of the best in the country maybe, but I've also heard from vets, especially when they're retiring from one branch of service or another, it still takes months and months and months to get seen. And the transfer of their records from wherever they were to Minnesota is arduous and inconsistent. I talked to one vet who's retired in March and is still waiting for his initial appointment. That is not quality service. I've been out to a lot of the VFWs and the American Legions, and one thing that I recognize is that veterans didn't know about the significant legislation that was passed this year in Minnesota as an act reference that their pensions will no longer be taxed. And there was a lot of good legislation passed for vets. So we prepared a summary sheet and have been taking this to the VFWs so that at least I can help inform them of the things that are being done. And I would certainly be an advocate to improve the process for getting them.
Other question?
I got a question.
Yeah.
And actually, this is I have some suggestions to see if I can get some agreement from each of the candidates. One of the I'm convinced one of the problems we have here as far as wages and so on, and more businesses here is this healthcare issue. It's this price disparity. And I think what Senator Schmidt's been working on as far as saying one rate area for our state, could be the start, but I know some are feeling that that may be more of a subsidy or benefit to male carriers. They are charging more, for procedures. So one of the things that we're going to talk about more about transparency after this is a suggestion to consider, require providers to put on what Medicare will allow. And they know that. They know what Medicare allows. They can put that on the bill so people can see that in relation to what they're getting charged. That's transparency. Okay? So that's one thing I'm requesting, and want to hear your input on that. The other is a lot of states allow for smaller groups to benefit from partial self-funded plans, where they qualify for discounts based on being healthy. Okay, like our neighbor in Wisconsin. We have some rules that make it more difficult for small businesses to qualify for those discounts. And also being able to not have to price for a lot of mandates and so on that larger companies are able to benefit from. And then lastly, to encourage, one of the things I think that could really help us is really encouraging this coalition building we talked about and Barb talked about, where encouraging employers to be able to talk, to deal directly and contract directly for a deal from our local providers. Because right now the providers don't look at the employers as being their customer. They look at the patient as their customer. But really the employer is providing the plan. And I think encouraging a coalition to go and talk, will be able to get a lot farther, than just relying on the carriers to do it for us. So, anyway, those are requests, and I'd like to see each of you maybe address to see if you agree with some of those suggestions.
Okay. I think what we'll do is that is probably the last question that we're going to be able to take looking at the time, and I know I was going to give them all a chance to wrap up too. So let's tell you what, I'll give each of you 4 minutes to address Pete's and then to wrap up with kind of whatever you would like to say, and then we're going to sort of be out of time. I know it's hard for you guys to know what time is in, so I'm going to give you 3, 2, 1. Lisa?
Thank you. Well, I think it's critical. I think we all look at, even in our own experiences, trying to decipher your, even if you have something relatively simple, trying to decipher your bills or what your costs are going to be before you go into a procedure. It's very, very difficult. I work, as I stated, I work a great deal with seniors, especially up in the Dakota County area, and all across our district, and working on this issue of assisted living and long-term care options, trying to figure out how much their health care is going to cost in advance and plan, and working with the families and trying to plan for this. it's very, very difficult and ridiculously difficult. I mean, this is an example of some regulation that's just gone awry, and I think we've got to get a handle on that. One of the things we could do is continue to hammer at this transparency issue, whether that's providing estimates of what your cost is going to be in advance of a procedure, and then saying that, requiring that the ultimate cost can be no more than, say, I don't know, 10% more than that estimate. Whether it's providing all of those kinds of transparency issues, I think are critical. And I would certainly be open to looking at all of those. In terms of the direct billing, I certainly think anything having to do with coalition building, where we can come as a community together to say, let's leverage our numbers as employers and as a community, that can be a good thing. I think there are a lot of details to work out on that, and I'd want to hear more about, what size do you actually need of employers or coalition to make that economically feasible. But new models, we have to look at these. We have to start saying that the traditional model of the employer or the provider really looking at the employee as the only client, that needs to change, I think, or something needs to change in terms of how the employer is providing these benefits. We see the self-funded plans and the partial and all those kinds of abilities and increasing ability to participate in those and decreasing regulations in those areas are things I think we need to address. I'd certainly be open to all of that. All of these regulations, it's gotten out of control. And anything we can do to bring that back into our realm, I think has got to be, we've got to look at. Just to wrap up, what I want to get across is that the last 8 years of experience on the city council, I've learned a great deal. Balancing the budget, we had a unanimous, nonpartisan city council and unanimously balanced that budget 8 times. It's been tough. We got through the 2009 downturn. A lot of costs, and then gradually rebuild. But how are we going to be as a community? We've got to be leaner. We've got to do more with less. We need to bring broadband into the community. We were ultimately able to do that. We need to look at economic development. Like we need to work with millennials. We need to work not necessarily building up or building out with more large-scale manufacturing, but maybe building up, maybe building more high technology, skilled workers, bringing them to our community and giving them the skills they need to either work at home or work in the community or work at the employers. But we need to do that in a planned way that doesn't raise taxes every single year in a huge amount, and it keeps taxes, if they do need to be raised, keeps them at a knowable planned rate. That's something we work very hard at here in Medway. And then we've been able to provide for infrastructure changes and maintenance, and you've all seen we're just about to finish the end of a 2-year huge project on Highway 61. I'm very proud of the work I've done on that, on leveraging state and federal and local funds for that project, which has been completely locally managed, and we've been able to do that without losing employers along that strip. Something I'm really proud of the work I've done on that, as well as working on the riverfront and the changes that are there. But there's a lot more work to be done. Is everything perfect? Absolutely not. We still have a lot to do in terms of economic development and in terms of supporting our schools. So all of those things, I'm happy to bring that experience and that background and that information, those skills up to the state capitol, and hope you'll consider me in November.
Thanks again, Pete and Karen, for organizing this great event. Really appreciate the focus and I think the collegiality and good approach to these sorts of discussions. And Pete, I've really enjoyed working with you the last several years on trying to move forward with some of your ideas. I think the challenges we're facing and there's not possibly going to be one solution that's going to fit everybody. Rather, I think that we need to have paths forward for allowing the good ideas that emanate at the local level to move and to make a difference for our communities. And so I look forward to continuing to work with you and trying to hatch an approach that works for Minnesota and that works for Redwood. You look at healthcare, and the challenges we face, as I mentioned earlier, are big and broad. Healthcare costs were not really addressed at the federal level with recent federal healthcare reform. And so it's left to the state to figure out how to make healthcare more affordable and have more options for folks, particularly in the individual and small group markets. That's the aspect of our healthcare market that is in true crisis. And you've seen insurance carriers leave that market. We need more choices for folks who are in the individual and small group markets. We need to do what we can to drive down costs, not just in southeastern Minnesota, but for the state as a whole, and also to smooth out those cost differentials for various parts of the state. You know, I won't get into all the legislation I've introduced and pushed to the legislature, but we had a number of provisions leave the Senate floor this year that would have been a long ways in addressing a number of these concerns. And so I look forward to continuing that work in the years ahead. When you look at it, consumption, expensive testing, we have the world's best healthcare, but it's expensive. We've got to figure out a way to have it both ways, to have great care and affordable care at the same time. And also doing more to make prescription drugs more affordable for all. You look at what we're seeing in Minnesota here with MNsure in our marketplace. Folks, I just want to get this point out here. You know, we had a failed system at the federal level of healthcare for decades. And this idea of market-based exchanges came from the very conservative Heritage Foundation. And this was an idea that was put in place in Massachusetts and has worked with mixed success. At the federal level, it's had its challenges, and it hasn't provided for affordable healthcare options in this state and in really any other. And so what we have to do is look at that 2.2 markets, marketplace, like MNsure or a federal exchange, because that's our alternative, folks. It's either MNsure or a federal exchange. Those sorts of approaches offer value to consumers. The idea was that it was going to lead to transparency, to apples comparisons for consumers to shop. But that Affordable Care Act didn't do enough for affordable care. And so we're left at the state level trying to figure out how to pick up the pieces and truly drive options for our small businesses and our individuals. That's going to be a huge priority in 2017. We've had a bipartisan task force put together recommendations. We've had great summits and discussions bringing together stakeholders, insurance carriers and providers and state regulators, trying to identify path forwards and to shine a bright light on the challenges that we're facing in southeastern Minnesota. So we're poised to do much more at the state level on this issue. And so I think as we move forward, that's going to be a big priority for me. Also following through on what's made Minnesota great. Human capital. Double down on making Minnesota continue to thrive in the years ahead. And as I look forward, I think that we've got to continue to mind our budget responsibly. I can't overstate how important it is to be in a state where we're running modest surpluses instead of big deficits. It allows the legislature to engage with folks around the state who do big, bold reform, comprehensive tax reform, making our education system more appropriate for the 21st century, digging in on this health insurance affordability thing. I mean, it's very difficult to do that when you're running deficit after deficit after deficit, but rather, we're back in the black. We're on sound fiscal footing, and we're able to focus on those big conversations that we have to have that will make Minnesota competitive in the decades ahead. And so I look forward to continuing that work. Much of it has already started. And I just, again, Karen, I really appreciate your time today, and for folks who took some time this morning to get together, I appreciate your questions. So thank you.
You had a lot of questions in there. So I'll just make a few points because I know we're trying to wrap up. On the transparency issue, a number of providers and facilities, you know, just like Mayo here, have websites where you can look up a procedure and look up the cost. So that has started. I think it's still somewhat challenging, and it's going to take some training, I think, on the consumer behalf that we do that. We're not trained to do that, right? So that's one piece. The Medicare cost issue, the reality is that the Medicare cost isn't the cost. The rest of us that are paying private insurance are paying to subsidize the Medicare cost. So that I would need to understand more about your proposal, but there isn't one single silver bullet solution, as we all know, to this issue. It's very complex. The issue of bringing small groups together in coalitions, the history of healthcare in Minnesota is that usually associations purchasing healthcare don't last. Because what happens is you have high-risk pools in there and you have low-risk pools. And the people that have the healthiest groups in that association, once that kind of settles out, they leave because their costs are going up to subsidize the higher-risk people in that pool. So any associations historically in Minnesota haven't worked. Our largest employers generally have moved to self-funding because they can manage their risk more effectively than they can by purchasing through traditional plans. So you've taken out large pools. I mean, Mayo itself is self-funded, right? Think of all they're one of the largest employers in the state of Minnesota. Our largest employers in Red Wing are self-funded. So when you've taken those people out of the pool, you've left with high-risk small business, high-risk individuals. Very hard to provide insurance for a reasonable cost. So that is what Obamacare has again, I will say, turn the Minnesota system, which was the best in the country, and that's one thing I will fight for when I go to St. Paul, is challenge that system. As far as just wrapping up, thank you for inviting me. This has been my first debate, so now I hope I know a little bit how it goes. But it's been enjoyable. I've been out listening to people, and I think that's the most important thing that a representative can do. With 5,000 bills entered into any legislative session, nobody can know everything about all the issues. But what a person can do is know who to call and listen. There's a lot of legislation that's considered, and a lot of it sometimes has unintended consequences. What I've been working on is meeting with community leaders, business owners, Chamber of Commerce, VFWs, so that I have a network of people that I can reach out to and say, what do you think? Here's something that we're considering. Peel back the onion for me. Tell me how it's going to work in your business, in your home, in your life. That's the most important thing a legislator can do. What I think is unique about my campaign is that the issues that I've heard are important to citizens of Red Wing and citizens in this region are healthcare, jobs, taxes, workforce, education. I'm unique in that I have experience in all those areas, and I have a long history with a successful business career. And I think that's important for the voters to consider. There will always be issues that come up. And so I would encourage you to consider my campaign as somebody that has tackled complex issues in the past and been a proven and effective leader at a multitude of issues. I look forward to your vote in November.
Again, thanks Pete for putting this together. Aaron, I really do appreciate this. This is my first debate as well. 3 questions about the health care. The Medicare part, as Barb said, isn't really taken into account when you get into self-insured companies. I happen to work for one. I look up on the website if I'm going in for my annual exam. I can't even figure out what that's going to cost me. I have no idea what that's going to be. So we do need to get the transparency in there. And I think that's where we in the state can get that through so that the insurance companies have to tell you what you're going to be paying. The other thing you see with the healthcare part there is the provider sends a bill in for $100. The insurance says they're going to pay $75. Well, then who's going to pay the $25? Because they've got the negotiated rate. Is that going to the customer, or is that going to be forgiven? What's going to be? And so we really never know when we get those bills and explanation of benefits in the mail. So that again leads to where we have to get the transparency through to say, this is your negotiated price, this is what you're paying, and forget about paying $75. So that has to be taken care of. As far as the self-funded plans for smaller groups, as Barb said, they work for a while, but then you find that there's disparities between the groups. You get the really healthy ones, you get the really unhealthy ones, and then people break off because they don't want to sit and pay for the additional costs. So we need to work on that. As far as coalition building, I like the fact of everything being done at the closest possible level to the issue. So if you're being contracted with the provider, again with the self-funded companies like the one I work for, we do that. And we do have our healthcare plans that work directly with the local providers. However, the smaller businesses and the farmers and that are left out on that. So we need to come together with a plan that puts together options for those smaller businesses and the farmers to be able to basically build a co-op of some kind and have the purchasing power that they need in order to keep their costs low too. So that's my points on your questions. I do thank everybody for your time here today. What I bring to the table is ethics, hard work, getting involved in the community. Community service has been a part of my family for a long time here in Red Wing. We take care of our communities. That's what Mom and Dad always said. We got to get involved in our communities and make it the best community we possibly can. So being engaged, understanding what the issues are that our city is facing, those are important things that we all need to take into consideration and take our God-given skills and
contribute to the community to make it the best place to live. And that's what I'm going to bring to the table. So I take issues at work as an engineer, as a project manager. I take the big issues, I break them down into smaller pieces, and I solve the problem. I've taken on numerous projects at the plant that we've had issues with, that I've been able to take it, turn it around, balance the budget on it, and make sure that we don't spend any more money than we absolutely said we were going to spend in the beginning. And I take that job very seriously, because when I get to the state senate, it's not my money, it's not anybody's money, it's the people's money. And we need to be good stewards of that, and we need to make the right investments in the state, in the community, and in the district. And I think with my background in business, in project management, and in the ability to break down complex issues into manageable pieces, I think I can take that skill set to the Senate and work across the aisle with the Democrats up there as well, because that's what I do at the plant. I work in all various aspects, diverse groups of people at the plant. And I build that rapport with the people, and I get the right people in the right places, and I find the right people to get in the right places. As Barb said, we build a coalition. Who can we go to with questions to get answers? And that's what I'm going to bring to the Senate.
Thank you.